Good evening. Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, we're starting a brand new Perek Sheni. This share is being learned for the Refuah Shalema of Rafal Chaim Meir Ben Sima Chasha. Okay, Chasha. And you should have a Refuah Shalema, B'Karv Mamish, B'Schus, all the learning that we're doing should bring him a Yeshua B'Karv Mamish. Now, in order to understand this Mishnah, let's try to recap a little bit of what we learned in the beginning of the Masechta. The Chachamim were Mesakin. Chachamim instituted that a Shliach, an agent which brings a get from Medinas Hayam, from overseas, from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, so he has to testify and say, B'fonai nichtav, he has to say that I saw the Sofer write the get in front of me, and B'fonai nechtam, I saw the Eidim, I saw the signatures, the witnesses sign on the shtar, on the get. Now, we brought two reasons why a aid has to say B'fonai nichtav, B'fonai nechtam, why the Chacham instituted. One reason is we brought from Rava. We said that we're worried that perhaps, and I'm saying Rava before Rabbah because, as the Gemara said a few times, Rabbah holds of Rava's din. So Rava, which really Rabbah says that as well, is that we're worried perhaps the husband will come afterwards and say the get was never written by me. I never validated this get. This get is mezuyif, and therefore it's a pasal get. She went ahead. She used this get to get remarried. So now the problem is that this child might be a mamzer. So that's one reason. We want to prevent the husband from coming later and saying that this get was mezuyif. So therefore, we allow this one aid to say b'fanei nichtav u b'fanei nechtam. So if the husband comes later and tries to protest that it's mezuyif, we don't believe him, as we explained in the first Perek Barucha. And just to elaborate more, that we said that perhaps, again, she's coming from, the husband is sending the Shliach Leilocha from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. He says, B'fanei nichtav or B'fanei nechtam. So now the husband can't come later and say it's mezuyif. And then she's going to get stuck that there's no agent to be Mekayim di Chasimis. So by saying B'fanei, we believe this Shliach over the husband. Rabbah said, according to the Maskana in the Gemara and the Daf and Beis, that the reason he agrees to the reason of Rava, but he says as well he adds another reason that the get, as we know, the Torah says the get has to be written lishma, that the husband is divorcing this wife, and the Gemara said that stam b'nei the people of Medinas Hayam, they're not baki in the halachas of Gittin, and maybe perhaps the get was not written lishma. So by saying b'fonai nichtav, b'fonai nechtam, and you mekayim the signatures of the edim, so you're testifying that the get is, we're not worried that the husband will come later and say it's mezuyif. And number two, according to Rabbi, you're saying also that the get was written lishma. Okay, so now what comes out is that according to everybody, the shliach needs to say b'fonei nechtam in order to be mekayim the chesimus of the get. According to Rabbah, the reason why they have to say b'fonei nechtam is also in order to say that it was signed lishma, and b'fonei nichtav also is, according to Rabbah, to know that it was written lishma. It doesn't need to be written lishma. We're worried that. Okay, so that's according to Rabbah, needs to be written lishma. According to Rava, the main thing is that the chesima of the edim to be mekayim, but since the chacham were mekel in the kiyum haget more than other stories, so at that one aid we believe over here, they're worried that maybe the people who will see what's going on by the gitei nashim that we believe one aid, so we might go ahead and they might make a mistake and say other stories as well. You could believe one aid to validate and verify the shtar of another document, like a monetary document. So we don't want them to become mixed up. So therefore they said you should say b'fanei nichtav, b'fanei nechtam. Okay? With this introduction, a little bit of a recap of last parak, now we can begin the next parak. The din is, the shliach says, the din is, the shliach hamevi get medina sayam, a shliach who brings a get from overseas to Eretz Yisrael, v'omar, and he says, b'fanei nichtav, he says that in front of me I saw the sefer write the get. Aval loy b'fanei nechtam, but he does not say the words b'fanei nechtam. He doesn't say that the two Eidim signed the get in front of me. So it comes out that this shliach lehilacha, he was not mekayim his shlichus, because the chacham were misakin that he has to say b'fanei nichtav and b'fanei nechtam, but he could not say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. And therefore, and according to Rabbah also, we're worried that maybe the get was not written l'shma. Okay, or what happened, b'fanei nechtam, he says that in front of me the Eidim signed on the star, aval loy b'fanei nichtav. So he says that I saw, the shliach le'ilocha says I saw the two Eidim sign on the get, but I did not see the get written in front of me. Or, another case, b'fanei nichtav kulay, he says in front of me I saw the entire writing of the get, u'b'fanei nechtam chetzi, but he's testifying and saying that I only saw the signatures of one of the Eidim that are written on the get. And he's not saying that he saw both signatures. He's just saying that I saw one signature. Another case, b'fanei nichtav chetzei, or he says that in front of me half of it was written, and the Gemara will explain exactly which half is he saying was written in front of him. And in b'fanei nechtam kulei, or he says that in front of me I saw all the two Eidim sign it. So the halacha is, in all these cases, it's possible. So again, just to recap, a shliach le'ilocha is bringing this get from Medina Sayam, and he's saying that in front of me the get was written, but it was not. In other words, he saw the sefer write the get, but he cannot testify that he saw the two Eidim sign on the get. Or he's saying that in front of me I saw two Eidim sign on the get, but I didn't see the get being written. Or a third case, he's saying that in front of me I saw the writing of the get, but I only saw one Eid sign on it. I didn't see the other Eid sign on it. Or he says that I saw half of the get being written, and the other half also. And then he says in front of me that I saw the two signatures. So then it's going to be puzzle. Okay, next case, the Mishnah says, Echad Omer, if one Eid says, B'fanai nichtav, he says, in front of me, the get was written, and Ve'echad Omer, B'fanai nechtam. And in other words, the first scenario the Mishnah brought was that you had one Eid, and the Eid either says, B'fanai nichtav, but doesn't say B'fanai nechtam, says B'fanai nechtam, but doesn't say B'fanai nichtav, or he says, it was written in front of me, but half of it wasn't written in front of me. So that's 1/8. The second case in the Mishnah is that you have two Eidim that are bringing shluchim over here, and Echad Omer 1/8 says b'fanei nichtav, ve'echad Omer b'fanei nechtam. You have one Eid that says in front of me I saw the writing of the star of the get, and the other Eid who brings it just says b'fanei nechtam, I saw the actual signatures. Halacha is puzzle. Why is it puzzle? Because the Chachamim only believed one shliach, like Rashi explains, the Chacham only believed one shliach to bring the get when he's taka shliach of the husband, and either like one explanation is you have two people, one was a shliach of the husband, one was not a shliach of the husband, and even as the Rashi explains, even if both of them are the Gemara will talk about this later. Even if both of them are shluchim of the husband, the get is not kosher because the edus that he's being made is only on the actual signatures. Because the Chachamim only believed this person unless he himself could be made on the ksiva. But over here, since the testimony is divided, one is testifying on the ksivas get, and the second is testifying on the ksivas of the get. So the halacha is the edus is not going to be accepted. Okay, so now the second case, like we said, is when you have two people, one person says b'fanei nichtav, and the other person says b'fanei nechtam, so it's possible. Now, what will be the case if three people are bringing the get? Shnayim oimrim, three people are bringing the get. Two people said b'faneinu nichtav, that in front of us it was written, and ve'echod, and the third witness, oimer, says that b'fanei nechtam. He says that I saw the writing of the chesimus of the edim. So the halach is puzzle. It's going to be puzzle. Why? Because you need to have them say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. And the fact is, you have two edim saying only that we saw the writing of the get. The third one says we saw the signatures. It's not going to be good. Now, Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda in this case holds that it will be kosher. Now, but he says if, let's say, one aid says echad oimer b'fanei nichtav. Now, let's say in the case of three edim, you have two people say in front of us it was written, ushnayim emrim, and two people say b'faneinu nechtam, in front of us it was signed. So then everybody's going to hold this kosher. Just to make a quick recap. So we started the Mishnah in the beginning, Daf Tezvav Amud Aleph, that you have a shliach lehilacha who's bringing the get from overseas, and he's saying, and this one guy says that I saw the writing of the get, but I did not see the actual edim sign on the get. Or he says, I saw the edim sign on the get, but I did not see the sefer writing the get. Or he says, I saw the sefer writing the get, the entire get, but I only saw one aid sign of the get. Or he says that I saw the writing of the get, or half the get, and I saw the signatures. So the halacha is all of them is going to be puzzle. Now, then we said, if you have two edim that bring the get, one says b'fanei nichtav, in front of me I saw the writing of the get, and the second one says b'fanei nechtam, I saw the signatures. So the halacha is weiter is going to be puzzle. Then the third case we brought is two people say b'faneinu nichtav, two people say that I saw the actual get being written, and the third guy and the third aid says I saw b'fanei nechtam, I saw it was signed. So we have a machlekes between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda. Tanakam holds it's puzzle, Rabbi Yehuda holds it's machshir. Now, in the case of when you have three edim, and echad eimer b'fanei nechtam, one guy says b'fanei nechtam, ushnayim eimer, and two of them say b'fanei nechtam, it's going to be kosher. Okay, so with this we can now start the Gemara. Okay, so now the Gemara asks on the case as follows. Gemara asks, Hasu Lomali, why do I need all these examples that the Mishnah brought? We already taught this halacha once. The first Mishnah, what did the first Mishnah in our Masechta say? Hamevi get from Medinas Hayom, if somebody brought a get from overseas, Chazal instituted, he has to say, B'fanei nichtav u'b'fanei nechtam. The Chazal instituted that he has to say in my presence, and it was written in my presence, and it was signed in my presence. Now, if a shliach does not say the words b'fanei nichtav u'b'fanei nechtam, he doesn't say the full takanas Chazal, so obviously it's self-understood that the get will be puzzled. So why does the Mishnah have to tell us now scenarios? If he says b'fanei nichtav but doesn't say b'fanei nechtam, or he says b'fanei nechtam doesn't say b'fanei nichtav, what's the din? The din is it's going to be puzzled. It's obvious. The Mishnah said, I maybe get Medinas Hayom, he has to say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. So the Gemara answers and says, if I would only have the first Mishnah, I would think tzarich. Yes, you're right. Ideally, you have to say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. V'iloi. Now, what if b'di'eved you did not say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam? Then, okay, it's kosher. It's kosher. Kamash malan. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us that this get is going to be puzzle if you do not say even b'di'eved. You do not say the full words of the Chazal b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. Okay. Now, the next part of the Mishnah says, the shliach that brought the get from overseas, and what does he say? B'fanei nichtav, that chetzoy, that half of the get was written in front of me, u'b'fanei nechtam kulei. So, again, the shliach is bringing a get from overseas, and he says that I saw half of the get written, but I saw the full signatures. Okay, so now the Gemara wants to know, the Gemara asks, Hey Chetzye, exactly which half is the shliach testifying that he saw the writing of the get? Now, in order to understand this, just explain the basics idea of get. A get, you have something called the teirif of the get, and you have the teifus of the get. The teifus of the get is basically the same standard lashon, the same standard terminology that's going to be on every single document. It's called a template. Every get has a template with the same wording. That's called a teirif. That's called a teifus. It's the standard text of the get. And then you have, in the get, you have something called the teirif. What's the teirif? The teirif is the names of the get, the dates, the names, where did it happen? So that you have to obviously change as whoever the couple's getting divorced, or where it is, etc. But you have a standard lashon of a get, so that standard lashon is called the teifus. The teirif is the dates. Now, what's the main part of the get that needs to be lishma? The main part is the teirif. Teirif needs to be lishma, the dates, the names. You can have a sefer, a scribe, write 100 gittin wholesale style, but they have to make sure that when it comes to the dates, the teirif, that has to be written lishma. So now, with this, let's try to understand when the Mishnah said that the guy is claiming, the shliach says, "B'fanai nichtav," in front of me, nichtav chetzi, in front of me, half of it was written, and I saw half of the writing of the get, and I saw the full signature. So the Gemara says exactly which half did he see. So, ilay mechetzi rishon, if you're saying that he saw the first half, in other words, the dates, the teirif, he saw the dates, and that's what he's saying. Only saw half of the writing of the teirif. So, va'am Rabbi Elazar said, "I feel like kosav by elashita achas lishma." Even if the husband or the sefer wrote only one line lishma for the sake of the woman, so then the halacha is shuvin in tzarech. The shliach is no longer required to check if the rest of the get was written properly or not. So if he's testifying that he saw the teirif of the get, he's saying, I saw some of it, so that's not a problem. Why shouldn't that be okay? Rashi says, you know what? He's testifying that he saw chetzi ha'achar, and he saw the latter half. In other words, he's not testifying on, again, the teirif of the get, the dates, but he's testifying on the actual teifus, the text. The text, we don't really care about, because every text is the same thing. It's the same standard template that they use. Okay. Then the Mishnah says that if the shliach says, "B'fanai nichtav kuloi," he says that in front of me I saw the entire get being written. However, b'fanai nechtem chetze, but I only saw one of the edim sign on the get. So the halacha is puzzle. It's going to be puzzle. Amar Reb Chisda says now a very big chiddush. He says, "Va'afilu shnayim me'idim al chsimas yad sheni." He says like this: even if two people testify to the signatures of the second witness, in other words, you have now two witnesses signed on the get. This shliach lahilacha, this agent who's bringing the get, he's saying, yes, one of the signatures I saw. Let's say Reuben, I saw him sign on it. There's a Shimon over here. I didn't see Shimon sign on it. So the Mishnah says it's puzzle. Reb Chisda says, even if you have two edim that testify on the authenticity of the second signature, the chiddush is that it's puzzle. It's puzzle. It's not a good get. Now, the question is, my time? Why? If the Beis Din has shluchim that they testify with regards to the signatures, at least to one signature, and you have two witnesses that testify on the second signature, so it should be good. So the Gemara answers a very interesting answer. It says like this: when Chazal instituted the takana to say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam, they said it has to work like this: oy kule b'kiyam get. Either the authenticity has to be entirely through the process of basically being mekayim the get. In other words, the get has to be ratified just like every other legal document. How do you validate a legal document? Is by two people attesting to the validity of the signatures of both witnesses. So if you don't have two people who can testify to the validity of both signatures on the get will be puzzle. In other words, both just to explain, both Eidim have to testify and say that I recognize both signatures. That's one thing. So, oy b'kulei kima get. Either you look at the get like every single document, like a legal document, and every document needs to have two people that recognize and ratify both signatures. Oy kulei b'takanas chacham. Or it must be entirely ratified by the takanas chachamim, that the chachamim said over here, the shliach is credible when he says b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam. Now, if the shliach cannot say, the shliach le'locha cannot say b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam, so then it doesn't work. And that's why in the case of when he says that b'fanei nichtav kulei, b'fanei nechtam chetzioi, Rav Chisda says even if you have two edim which say we recognize the second signature, well, not good, because either when it comes to kiyum shtaris, you need to have always two edim that recognize both signatures, or the chalas chachamim of b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam is on both. Okay, so Maskul Rava asks on the chiddush of Rav Chisda. What's his question? So he says like this: Mi iko midi da ilu omar chad kosher. Now, is there ever a matziv in which one person said, you have the one person says, you know, the get is okay. In other words, if the shliach would have, let's say you had the shliach by himself, he would have attested to the signatures of the second witness. Let's say the shliach would come and say, it's standard case, b'fanei nichtav or b'fanei nechtam, he would have been believed. So now, what are you saying? So this one guy who brings the get, he can ratify, he can attest to both signatures, hashtadika trei. So now that there's two witnesses who attest to the signatures, it's possible, it's valid, it makes no sense at all. Rava says, according to Rabbi Chisda, it makes no sense at all. If you have, think about the logic, you have two edim that testify on the signature of this signature, that's no good. But if you have one eid, that will work. It doesn't make any sense at all. So therefore, Ela Amar Rava says, okay, turn over the page, Daf Tes Vav on the base. Therefore, Rava says a new chiddush. He says, the chiddush is that who, the halacha is, the chiddush is that even if the shliach lahilacha, and another person testify with regards to the second witness, so you have like this, you have the shliach lahilacha, and he's testifying and saying that the second signature, it's a good signature. And another guy testifies with him only on the second signature, the halacha is puzzle. Now you're going to ask, puzzle, why is it puzzle? If the guy himself would have come and say b'fanei nichtav, b'fanei nechtam, it would be no problem. But now that he has a second guy with him, he's going to mess it up. So he says, my time, what's the reason? What's the reason for this? So he says like this, Asu lechlufe b'kiyum shtaris ba'alma. We'll worry that perhaps people will come to confuse it with another type of a legal document. In other words, people will rely on one witness who testifies about his own signature, and that of another signature. And then other witnesses join with him to testify with regard to the other signature. And what's going to happen? As a result of this, the Gemara says, V'kanafik, like this. So it says this. Again, we're worried that perhaps people will come confused with, let's say, a typical case of a legal document, and they're going to rely on one witness who testifies. They're going to say, okay, one witness testifies about his own signature, and the other signature, and he testifies to the other signature, while another joins with him to testify with regard to the other signature. And then, as a result of that, as a result of this, so what's going to happen is the full sum of money minus a quarter will basically be extracted with the testimony of one witness. So like this, in order basically to make sure that the document is legal and to ratify the legal document, two edim have to testify to the validity of each signature. Now, if the Chachamim will allow one witness to testify about his own signature and another witness to join him testifying about the other signature, in the case, let's say, of a get, it can basically lead to the same problem and think, okay, other stars, Kim stars is all. Other Kim stars, you need to have two edim So you would think that over here also. Now, what's the idea over here? So Rashi says, the Torah says, Apishnei Edim Yakum Davar. When you have two Edim that testify, so basically each one is giving 50% validity of the of the star of the get. And what's happening over here is you have one Eid is taking 75%, and the other one 25. It doesn't make sense. It has to be Apishnei Edim Yakum Davar. Not that one person takes 75%. Okay. So Maskal Rav Ashi asks a shaila on this. Mi'ika midi. Is there any type of situation? The ilu masikle iu lekul dibura, which means if he himself would complete the entire statement. In other words, if he would say b'fanei nechtam, so then what's going to happen is then the document is valid. In other words, again, if he would say the statement by himself, then kosher be kosher. But now that there's another person testifying with him, you're saying that it's puzzle. It's puzzle. It doesn't make any sense. So Rashi says, Afilu Eimer. Even if the shliach says, Ani hu eid sheni, even if the second witness who signed on the get. Again, afilu Eimer ani hu eid sheni, even if the shliach says, I am the second witness. Shliach halacha says, I am the second witness who signed on the divorce. Halacha is it's puzzle. Why? My timer. What's the reason? Why is this get? Why can it not be validated by a combination of two types? So he says, my timer, because again the same answer. Oy kula b'kima get. Either you have it has to be like a regular kima get, like kula b'takanas chacham, or both of them have to be ratified via rabbinic decree. In which case, the testimony of the shliach is considered equivalent to two people who, like we say, who ratify the signatures. Okay. Now the Gemara brings a proof to this. We learned in the Mishnah that if a shliach said b'fanei nichtav kuloi, if he says that in front of me the entire get was written, b'fanei nechtam chetzi, and in front of me I only saw 1/8 puzzle. Now, so the Gemara asks, idach chetzi hechidami. What are the circumstances at the other half? So the Gemara says, if you're going to say that there's no one who testifies about it at all, then no one testifies about the second signature. So he says, if in the case when somebody says that the entire get was written in front of me, in other words, you have two eidim. One says b'fanei nichtav, and the second one says b'fanei nechtam. In other words, in that case, you have one shliach says it was signed in my presence, in which case the shliach testifies with regard to all the writing, and the other shliach testifies with regard to all the signing. And nevertheless, we're saying it's puzzle. So chetze. So if you have a shliach testifying on only half of the signatures, is it really necessary? Why would the Mishnah say this? So the Mishnah answers. So the Gemara answers and says like this: either the Mishnah must be teaching that the get is puzzle, even if there's an additional testimony with regard to the second signature, and the chiddush can be explained according to Rava, who holds that the shliach joins with another person to testify about the second signature, or according with the opinion of Rav Ashi, who holds that he testifies about his own signature. And the Gemara says, and this comes to exclude the opinion of Rav Chisda, who said that the document is puzzle even when there's a full ratification of the second signature, because the Mishnah wants to tell us the chiddush of this case without specifying it, and one could learn from it the lesser chiddush. Since Rav Chisda's chiddush is greater than that of the other chachamim, had the Mishnah been taught for that purpose, it should have issued this explicitly. So Rav Chisda will tell you l'tai meich, based on your reason, if this is really true, then b'fanei nichtav avalei b'fanei nechtam lamali. Why do you have to give the case of b'fanei nichtav and b'fanei nechtam and not b'fanei nechtam? Ella, rather, the Mishnah is teaching me a case of Leizu afzoi. In other words, when the Mishnah is teaching us that the Mishnah is saying this, that he's teaching us the style that not only this one, but also this one. In other words, each one is teaching us a chiddush over the other. Hachanami, here also leizu afzu katani. We're going to teach the case of leizu afzu. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to stop a little bit teaching this din. The Gemara is going to bring another halacha of Reb Chisda in regards to combining different things together. Now, a Reshus HaYachid min HaTeira is, it was taught in regards to, let's say, a domain for Shabbos. If the place is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and it has a walls at least of 10 tefachim height, the halacha is that is a Reshus HaYachid. Now, if it was surrounded either by like by mud or by mechitzas, or let's say there was a pit of 10 tefachim in the ground, and it was 4 by 4 and 10 tefachim deep, so the halacha is that would be constitute a Reshus HaYachid. So now the Gemara says like this: Omer Reb Chisda says Gidud Chamisha, Umechitza Chamisha. If let's say in regards to a Reshus HaYachid, a Shabbos domain, if let's say you had a Gidud, a Gidud is like it's like an embankment. It's a height but it's like, you go to like if you ever go to like the deserts, so you have like these different types of embankments. It's so like this. So now you had the Gidud is Chamisha. So this embankment is, let's say, 5 tefachim tall. Umechitza Chamisha, and you have the mechitza is 5. So the halacha is, a regular mechitza is 5. The halacha is aim is starf, and you can't combine the Gidud and the mechitza together to constitute a Reshus HaYachid. So he says like this: Rabbi Chisda says, either the entire structure has to be composed entirely of a mechitza, like a partition, a fence, or the entire thing could be either a pitch or an incline, but you can't combine the two. Now, Darish Meimar, the Meimar says, Gidud Chamisha, Mechitza Chamisha. He argues and says, if you have a Gidud of 5 and a Mechitza of 5, the halacha is mitzdarfen, you could combine the two to constitute Reshus HaYachid. V'hilchasa, the halacha is mitzdarfen, they are mitzdarf. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to give a similar halacha in regards to combining different halachas that the Chacham instituted. The Chacham instituted that a person has to wash his hands. As we know, before you wash your hands to kivei suda on the bread, the Chacham said you have to wash your hands. And you have to take, what's the minimum measure you have to take to wash your hands? So the halacha is you have to take at least a revis lug of mayim, which is, in order to wash your hands, you have to take it from a revis mayim of water, and you have to wash your hands. So now, based on this, the Gemara asks this: Boi Ilfus. Ilfus raised a shaila. What was the shaila? So like I said, in regards to washing your hands, so he asked him, Yadayim, in regards to washing your hands, Tahiris Tachatzoin. So he asked the question. He asks, can hands be pure in halves, or can hands not be pure in halves? Now, what does that mean? What does it mean, hands being pure in half or not? So he says, hey Chidami, what's the case? What are the circumstances that we're dealing with over here? So he says, now, if Reb Ilfus' question was that two people wash their hands with a quarter lug of water, and therefore in actuality each of them washes only, let's say, with a half of a quarter of lug. So the halacha is, Vatran, we learned in the Mishnah in Yadayim says that Mirivis Noitli Yadayim, with the amount of a revis, one can wash the hands of one person, and even two. In other words, a quarter of a lug of water is enough, if it's enough for one person to wash his hands before eating bread. So even two can wash their hands simultaneously with the same amount. In other words, if let's say, the way I understand it is, if let's say two people stick out their hands over here, and then you have a revis of water, and now you want to wash simultaneously their hands together, so l'cher, that should work. So what does he mean? What's this question by saying tahiris tachatzoin or ain't tahiris tachatzoin? What does it mean? So ve'ela, rather, to kamashi chada chada yodei. Rather, Ilf is referring to a case where one washed his two hands one by one. In other words, he washed both of his hands, but not both hands at the same time. He washed one and then he washed again. So he asks, so again, so not that he's washing, two people are washing their hands simultaneously, but rather where one washed his hands, two hands one by one, not at the same time. So the Gemara asks and says, but we learned didn't we learn in the Mishnah, says with regards to one who wants to purify one's hands by washing with a keli. So it says, if he washes one of his hands with, let's say, a keli, with a vessel, and one hand by, let's say, immersing it in a river, so what's the din? Yod of tahiris. His hands are pure. So the Mishnah says that there is no need for both hands to be washed simultaneously. If you want to take one hand and wash it in a kli and one hand in a river, that's fine. So rather the Gemara says this. Rather, Ilfas' Shiloh was in a case where he washes his hands in two halves, which means he first washes one half of his hand, and next washes the second half of the same hand. So he washes, let's say, half of his hand, and then he washes again this next part of his hand. So l'chayra, what's the question? If the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yana already says you're dying when it comes to the hand. Ein teheres tachatzayin. He says that you cannot pure your hand in halves. So if a person washes half of his hand and then pauses and washes the second half, he wasn't mitar his hand. So the Gemara is trying to understand, what does it mean? What is this question? If you're saying it's talking about that you have two people, or let's say one person washing his hand, or two people washing their hands simultaneously with the lug, so that's not a problem. Rather, you're going to say that he washes one hand azay, one hand azay. That's also not a problem. So now, rather, what do you mean is that he washed half of his hands and then he washes again the next half of his hands. The din is ein teres lachatzayin. So the Gemara answers and says, interesting, that the iko mashka tefeach. When he washed half of his hands, there's liquid that's still tefeach, still moist on his hands. When one washes the second half of his hand, so some of the moisture remains on the portion of his hand that he already washed, and therefore a person can think that the liquid now joins the water which he washes the second half of his hand. So here's your hand, he washed half of it, and now he wants to wash the second half of his hand, but there's still moist on the first part of the hand, so the shaila is, does that work? Okay, so now the Gemara asks, and says, and when there's liquid that makes a person's hand moist, what is it? In other words, we don't care. Okay, Daf Tes Zayin Omen Aleph. He says like this. He says a din, there's a halacha. The Mishnah in Tahira says, in the case of handitzik, a case of, let's say, a stream of water, Veha ko tafres, or when you have water on an incline, umashke tefeach, and you have liquid that has moist. So the halacha is einoi chiber, it does not connect, loy l'tuma v'loy l'tara. What happens is that when you have either a stream of water or water descending on an incline or liquid, so that's moist, it doesn't connect, not for tuma, not for tara. In other words, these liquids do not connect, for impurity. What does that mean? Let's say you have Talmudic water is in one place and becomes attached, let's say, to another source of water pouring from above it. The water above it is not considered attached to the Talmudic water, and it's not tummy. Not only that, they also do not connect for purity. In other words, if you have, let's say, two collections of water, or let's say they're attaching via the pouring of a stream, so they don't join together to form the amount of water necessary to form, let's say, a mikveh, which people can become tar. Now, the liquid that is on a hand of a person is moist, should not basically serve to attach these two halves together. So that's what the Mishnah is saying. It says, say when it comes to being nitzuk, if let's say you have, here's your tardika water, and now you're pouring here's your tamidika water, now you're pouring the tardika water, even though there's a stream of water, it doesn't connect the top to make a tummy. The same thing also when it comes to mikvahs, also it doesn't connect the two together. And then the third thing the Mishnah says that when it's moist, it doesn't connect. So how could you say we're talking about when the guy washed half of his hands, then he waited, but it's still moist, now he's washing the second half, that you're going to say that it makes it tamei, that you can connect the two halves. The Mishnah says that even if it's teifeach, it doesn't connect the two halves. So the Gemara answers and says, we're talking about a case, that you have so much moist that it can make other things moist. So now, in other words, like we said, the half of the hand, it's not just moist. It's moist enough to render other things moist. So the Gemara asks, Tonami Tanina. We also learned this in a Mishnah. Teifeach lehatfiach. We also learned as well, with regards to if you have liquid that's moist enough to render another thing moist. So the halacha is chibur, it connects. Okay, so the Gemara answers and says, Dilmul in mikvahs, perhaps the halacha that liquid rendering an item moist enough to render another item moist, joins with other liquids, is only in regards to the halacha of mikvahs, in regards to the halacha of a mikveh. And Rabbi Yehuda, and this will be in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda. The time we learned in the Mishnah, mikveh sheyesh ba'arboim sa, if a mikveh had exactly 40 sa, it's exactly 40 sa, and what happens is, v'yordu shnayim, and now two people went into the mikveh together. So the Mishnah says, shneim b'vas achas tahidim, if both of them go in together, they are tar. Now, which is, we know that if a person went into the mikveh, he definitely took part of the memsa with him. A guy, whenever it's just practical, it's logical. When somebody goes into a body of water, you can't say it's the same amount of water is left. So obviously he took some of the water with him. Yet the Mishnah says that if he has exactly 40 sa and both of them going together, the din is that they're both tar. Now, what if bazachar? What if they went to mikvah one after another? The first, so what's the din? Rishon tar. The first one is tar. V'asheni tamei, and the second one is tamei. Why? Because we say some of the water first for sure clung to the first person, and after the first person went to the mikveh, now the second one you're saying has less than 40 sa. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, this is like this: if the first person's feet were still touching the water in the mikveh when the second person went to mikveh, so the halacha is afasheni tar. The second person is tar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the water left on the body of the person who went to mikveh connects. It makes a chibur with the water in the mikveh to require the amount of 40 sa. So what do we see from here? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion: when you have liquid that, in other words, is moist enough to make something else moist, it connects the two liquids. So he says this halacha is dafka by mikveh. So it's a suffix with regards to the liquid. It's a suffix whether liquid that is moist enough to render another item joins with the water used to wash the second half, and this was his shaila. In other words, he wants to bring a raya from mikveh, but mikveh is maybe different because mikveh is a special din. But the shaila is in regards to netilas yadayim, what's the halach? Okay, so that was his question. Okay, we'll stop here for 2 minutes.